Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with his Vietnamese counterpart in Beijing on Monday. Xi's meeting with Nguyen Phu Trong was his first with a foreign leader since he secured an unprecedented third term as the head of China's Communist Party.
Xi emphasized that China and Vietnam share the goal of advancing socialist modernization and, in what was seen as a swipe against the U.S., said the two nations should never let anyone interfere with their progress. He called for stronger bilateral ties.
At present, China and Vietnam face new opportunities and challenges in each other's socialist cause and promoting the relationship between the two countries and the parties. I would like to have an in-depth exchange of views with Comrade General Secretary on the construction of socialism in our countries and the development of relations.
The meeting comes as the United States and China have been engaging in a competitive courtship of countries in Southeast Asia. Both have been sending senior government officials to ASEAN member nations. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin paid a visit to Vietnam last year. That came at a time when Vietnam was at loggerheads with China over a disputed area of the South China Sea. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris also visited Hanoi. She called on Vietnam to increase the pressure on China to challenge its increasing maritime aggression in the Indo-Pacific.
We need to find ways to pressure and raise the pressure, frankly, on Beijing to abide by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and to challenge its bullying and excessive maritime claims.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with Vietnamese Communist Party General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong last year. The Chinese government says Wang described relations with Vietnam during the meeting as having particular strategic importance. It added that Wang said the two countries should deepen political trust and cooperation, given the complex international situation. Wang also attended a G20 foreign ministers meeting in July this year. It was seen as another move by China to try to keep up with the United States as both countries increase their involvement in the Indo-Pacific region. What does Nguyen Phu Trong hope to achieve during his visit to Beijing? Trong sent a congratulatory message to Xi on the day he was re-elected as China's leader last month, saying, "I look forward to seeing you again soon." 2 days later, China announced the official visit by Chong, the first by a foreign leader since Xi's re-election. Chong was elected to a rare third term at last year's National Congress of the Communist Party of Vietnam. Effectively, he is the supreme leader of the country, in a position very similar to Xi. The meeting between the two reinforced the impression that the two countries enjoy strong ties and don't want friction or confrontation. Chong used the opportunity to show that Hanoi will continue to place importance on its relations with Beijing. A major factor behind Vietnam's emphasis on relations with China is their close economic ties. The value of trade between the two countries has been increasing by the year. China is Vietnam's largest trading partner in terms of combined exports and imports. However, there are outstanding issues between the two sides. One area where their relations have been increasingly strained in recent years involves territorial disputes in the South China Sea. In 2020, Vietnam lodged a protest against Beijing after one of its fishing boats sank following a collision with a Chinese Coast Guard vessel. Vietnam also expressed concern about a law that took effect in China last year that allows its Coast Guard to use weapons. In the meantime, Vietnam is strengthening ties with the United States. In 2015, Chong became the highest-ranking Vietnamese official to visit the U.S. since the end of the Vietnam War. The two countries have been promoting defense cooperation since 2018, with U.S. aircraft carriers making port calls in Vietnam. Chong is expected to continue with a pragmatic approach as he pursues his country's national interests while maintaining a balance between the two superpowers.
For more on this, we are joined by our correspondent, China correspondent, Nakamura Genta in Beijing. So Genta, the first foreign leader invited by President Xi Jinping, now in his third term, was from Vietnam. What were the intentions of Xi?
The choice of Vietnam, another socialist country, is symbolic amid the deepening confrontation with the West over the situation in Ukraine and Taiwan. The two leaders shook hands in front of flags of their countries and their communist parties, and Xi called Vietnam a comrade and brother. They also embraced without masks and showed their closeness, despite the harsh zero-COVID policy in China. During the meeting, President Xi referred to ideology, saying the two socialist countries face a very complex international environment and serious risks. As Beijing feels more isolated internationally, it has recognized there is a huge benefit in strengthening ties with Vietnam. China has territorial disputes with Vietnam over the South China Sea, which could cause U.S. intervention. Vietnam is also a member of the U.S.-led IPEF, a new economic zone initiative, and China may want to stop Vietnam from becoming closer to the U.S. Xi also stressed his intention to encourage Chinese high-tech companies to invest in Vietnam and to work with Hanoi for building a stable supply chain. He's clearly aware of the Biden administration's increasing moves to decouple the U.S. from China in the high-tech sector.
Leaders from Pakistan and Germany are scheduled to visit China this week. What are China's aims?
The recurring point in all of them is their intention to restrain the United States. Pakistan is an important hub in the Belt and Road Initiative, a massive economic zone being promoted by President Xi. As neighboring India is deepening its security ties with the U.S. through the Quad and other frameworks, she's hoping to counter that by strengthening relations with Pakistan. Also, German Chancellor Scholz will be the first G7 leader to visit China since the pandemic broke out. The Scholz administration has stressed that it will take a strong stance against China's hegemonic moves. But China hopes to use economic relations as leverage with Germany and make a breakthrough in restoring relations with Europe.
So what is the focus of Chinese diplomacy going forward?
The biggest focus is whether a U.S.-China summit will be held during the upcoming G20 meetings in Indonesia this month. On Sunday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi held a telephone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. They apparently discussed the arrangement of the summit meeting. The U.S. is increasingly concerned that Xi will accelerate moves toward reunification with Taiwan, as Xi has cemented his power base in the newly formed Chinese leadership. To this end, Blinken stressed the need to maintain communication to avoid unintended military clashes. Meanwhile, Wang Yi insisted that the U.S. should first stop its approach of suppressing China. He called for rectification of U.S. export restrictions on China, saying that they undermine Chinese legitimate rights and interests. China, too, would like to avoid a head-on confrontation with the U.S., but it will not make any concessions over Taiwan or the South China Sea, even if the U.S.-China summit meeting is realized. If no concrete results are achieved there, tensions will increase even further.
Nakamura Genta, live from Beijing. Thank you so much.